Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I am grateful. Let me start with a photograph I took of the sunrise this morning at about 6:40 from the car park in my office, and I tweeted, "Morning world, rise and shine. This is Nairobi." And it was a pleasure catching up and taking in the East African temperature with Bonnie Tuna on CNBC Africa this morning as well. Macro thoughts, well, I think increasingly we're going to some kind of deal with Greece. And I agree with Jan Lois on Bloomberg, who says the risk scenario of Greek exit from the EMU is a drama for Greece. But in this analyst's view, not for world markets. And I think increasingly it's been baked into the price. And essentially I think they're going to kick the can down the road. Holger Scheipitz tweeted, "Euro rises before the Greece summit as JP Morgan calls the drama a sideshow." But subsequent from this tweet, it's actually given up ground. It got as high as 114, we're now at 113.30. And then just sticking with macro thoughts, I couldn't resist this from Eric Huntsader. Grid pattern, either a timed algo running on NASDAQ or system overload. And I thought to myself, that's interesting, isn't it, that it could be either. Home thoughts, I like this photograph that Al Arabiya tweeted, father's devotion to his daughters, and let me say it here, I'm so proud of my 3 daughters, and they're a real privilege to have been the father for. And I just like that photograph because it's so happy, isn't it, when you look at it. The Telegraph tweeted, summer solstice, spectacular sunrise at Stonehenge. And I must say, all those years in the United Kingdom, I never went to the summer solstice, so quite interested in the photographs. They look quite beautiful. Political reflections, Dylan Storm. Roof appears on closed circuit television at his bond hearing in Charleston, South Carolina, in a still image taken from video. And I've got nothing to say. Has been said. King Salman of Saudi Arabia has sent his most beloved son as a personal envoy to meet Putin. And then have a look at the photograph Putin tweeted of this meeting with Deputy Crown Prince, Defense Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud. And if you look carefully, you're going to see in the background Ali-Naimi, the oil minister for Saudi Arabia. And for those who follow the oil markets as I do, that one would be very careful about that. That might well be a signal to everyone that they've struck a deal here on the price of oil in particular. So let's keep an eye on that. We're up, sort of 50 cents this morning. Putin is a malign influence in Eastern Europe, said Ashton Carter. Termed Russian President Vladimir Putin a malign influence in Eastern Europe, said the Russian leader's vow to expand Moscow's cache of nuclear missiles was loose rhetoric. Amid continuing tensions over the conflict in Ukraine, the US will keep the door open for Russia to choose better relations. Carter said something he indicated was a long shot in remarks to reporters aboard his Pentagon jet on Sunday. Russia might not change under Vladimir Putin or even thereafter, Carter said. Pentagon chief criticized Putin's announcement on June 16th that Russia intends to field 40 additional intercontinental ballistic missiles able to outwit anti-missile defenses. Carter said, "It was not appropriate behavior in my judgment." And Carter also said the US and its European allies must be able to respond on short timelines because that's how events today unfold, unlike a quarter, let alone a half century ago. He's very hard-nosed, is Carter, and he's taking the fight both sides, to Russia and to China. But interestingly, Saudi Arabia has broken through the cordon sanitaire around Putin. Put up a photograph that Sputnik tweeted of Ashton Carter. And then also we learned that Saudi Arabia has now enacted its 100th beheading of the year. Beheadings are off the charts in Saudi Arabia. This was an excuse for the WikiLeaks leak, as per the note that Assange made. Mirwais Afghan inside the Afghan parliament after Taliban attack Kabul. He's taken a photograph sort of just after the event, I think. This photograph got my attention. Syrian migrants search for their missing passports in the sea after their arrival at the Greek island of Lesbos. And then finally another photograph, Israeli soldiers taking part in a military exercise at the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights. Last month was the hottest month on record, and the past 5 months were the warmest start to a year on record, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is not a good sign. Currency markets, euro topped 114 early in the morning, now at 113.27. Dollar index, therefore, is above 94. Japanese yen, 123.10. Swissy, 0.9172 when I checked, but that looks out of date now. The pound, 158.54, was above 159 at the open. And then the South African rand was around the 12.17 level. I'll put up a 6-month chart of the dollar index, and basically Janet Yellen, in my view, still holds the pistol for the next round of the dollar rally. I think she decided to give things a pass last time round. It was very soft, dovish, but I think that was more looking ahead of her and thinking of the potential Greek imbroglio. Tempered her comments, but I think they will raise rates this year once, maybe even twice. And the act of that first rate increase will be cathartic and will be a catalyst for the dollar to rally again. Euro dollar, as I said, 113.26. Greece, I think, is now largely baked into the price. And given that, we might not even see a rally. We might just see it fall, which would be interesting. European shares rallied on the prospect of a Greek deal. The DAX opened up 2.8% higher. And Holger kindly put up an image, so I'll put that up. Great piece in Bloomberg about the $121,000 Range Rover supercharged long wheelbase is a gentleman's tank. The Range Rover supercharged is big and bulky, yes, but it has an innate grace. It remembers its manners. Coming to commodity markets, trading in futures is falling as WTI, which is the New York West Texas Intermediate blend of crude oil, swings in a $5 range, the narrowest in 19 months. US oil output will fall to 9.19 million barrels a day in February from 9.59 million last month. Production will average 9.43 million barrels this year, the most since 1972. And in that context, we've got to bear in mind what I was saying about that photograph I saw of Putin, the Crown Prince, and Ali-Naimi. They could easily do a deal here to withdraw some supply and reduce the supply side, and that would send the price up quickly. So we've got to keep an eye on that. But nevertheless, we are still oversupplied, and it would take both of them to gang up and cut simultaneously to make a really big difference. Crude oil, I'll put up a 5-day chart. Last time I can see it's $60.31. Gold trading at 1194.77. We've rallied back a little bit here, but I don't think we're going to hold. Professor Steve Hanke says China, the volatility continues. He posted this image and you can see what he's talking about. POTUS is to be the first sitting US president to visit Ethiopia. That's good news. Bad news on the other side is South Sudan. 250,000 children face starvation. 2/3 of the country's 12 million people need aid, with 4.5 million people facing severe food insecurity. This is the UN. Interesting piece on France 24. Booze firms toast Africa's ripening market. Wine consumption in Africa is rising 5 times faster than the global average, according to a study of 24 sub-Saharan African countries released this past week by British wine consultancy IWSR at the world's leading wine fair Vinexpo. Africans gulped down a total of 864 million bottles of still light wine in 2013, a rise of 17.3% in 5 years. Remains relatively modest for a continent of 1.1 billion. Market is forecast to grow another 11% by 2018. More and more Africans have disposable income, said Daniel Metier, who led the study. The growth is exponential, the demand is there. The African hard liquor market grew 13% between 2010 and 2014 compared to 3% growth for wine. That's interesting. The African market is the market of the future for cognac, absolutely, said Hervé Bacher-Gabrielson, president of the French cognac firm that shares his name. There's been an influx of Chinese or big consumers of cognac. That's interesting, isn't it? South African all shares up 4.0908% this year, but has corrected 6.128% since closing at a record on the 24th of April this year. Dollar Rand, when I looked last, was at 12.17. I'll put up a 1 month chart. I think we're going to go and test the top in the not too distant future. Egyptian EGX 30, it's down 4.38% year to date, and 15% below a 12-month high reached on the 4th of February this year. Nigeria's new President Muhammadu Buhari has been advised by his transition committee to end a fuel subsidy program and to privatize Nigeria's 4 refineries. The last time Goodluck Jonathan tried that, didn't work out too well. Everyone came out on the street, but it's a necessary thing that has to be done, and I think in these scenarios you do it early, your popularity is high, you try and push these things through. The Nigerian all shares down 4.039% in 2015 and 22.8% below its 12-month high from the 16th of July 2014. Bulldozers razed hundreds of homes and businesses in the poor Sodom and Gomorrah neighborhood of Ghana's capital. What a name for a neighborhood. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 4.73% this year and 1.086% below a 12-month high reached in July last year. Uganda's central bank said on Friday it was in the market to sell an undisclosed amount of foreign exchange after the shilling hit a new all-time low. Mozambique tuna bonds plunged to record low on restructuring. The bonds of Mozambique's tuna fishing company plunged, sending yields to all-time highs after a report from a state-owned news service that the government is seeking to rearrange the debt. Yields on the $850 million of securities due September 2020 and backed by the Mozambique government soared 208 basis points, the biggest increase on record, to 9.52%. Mozambique wants to extend the repayment period, negotiate lower interest rates, Agência de Informação de Moçambique reported, citing Minister of Economy and Finance Adrian Malien. 7 years is too short a time to repay the bonds, even with a 2-year grace period, and the interest charges are too high. The news service cited the ministers saying in a report published by the All Africa global media website. A lack of clarity about the bonds is a source of increasing volatility in the markets, said Victor Lopez, an African economist with Standard Chartered PLC. At a macro level, the fiscal picture is not bright in Mozambique, and debt levels are among the highest in Africa. Of course, on the other side, you've got this enormous gas fines. Paul Wallace from Bloomberg tweeted an image off Bloomberg of the price drop. I'll put that up. I'll also put up an image of Maputo that I took from the sea about 4 years ago. And then I saw this by Backpacker Travel. Who needs paved roads in Mozambique when you've got beautiful orange dirt like this? James Newlands, the leader of EY's American Africa business, said he was seeing a softening in perception globally toward Africa, but that North Americans are becoming more positive on the continent. And that strikes a chord. That's my image as well. We're confident the Africa Rising narrative remains intact and sustainable, but we can't take that for granted. Zimbabwe started to retire its old currency 6 years after hyperinflation prompted the country to switch to the US dollar. With the prospect of the legendary $100 trillion bills disappearing for good, resourceful entrepreneurs took to eBay to offload their stashes. The online price for a note that would net you 40 cents at a local bank, around $30. The most expensive city in the world to live in is Luanda, second Hong Kong, third Zurich, fourth Singapore, 5th Geneva, 6 Shanghai, 7 Beijing, 8 Seoul, 9 Bern, and 10 Jamina in the Chad. When you're losing a tenth of the population a year, you have to do something more urgent, nail down where the major killing is happening, and stop it at the source. This is Samuel Vassar, a biologist at Washington University in Seattle, who's doing all that analysis on feces and on DNA to work out where all these tusks that are going to Asia are coming from. Tullow Oil is to settle its Uganda tax dispute for $250 million. That's progress. My weekend piece is about POTUS, President Obama's visit. I said it's a good endorsement for Kenya. Barack Hussein Obama is the 44th and current President of the United States and the first African American to hold the office. President Obama was born in Honolulu. His mother's family was from Kansas, which is also the setting of one of my favorite films, The Wizard of Oz. And his father's family, of course, hails from Kogelo in Kenya. I recall the morning we learned that Barack Obama had won the presidency in November 2008, and there was ecstasy in the air. I remember turning to Nishat and asking, "Do you feel it?" I remember thinking how curious that an election so far away could be the catalyst for this mass ecstasy here in Nairobi. Ambassador Robert F. Godek, who was recently my guest at Mindspeak and is the US ambassador to Kenya, compared President Obama's visit to Kenya to President John F. Kennedy's visit to Ireland. And I thought to myself, exactly. It's a real big moment, and I asked Bob Godek, is it a big deal? Doesn't get bigger than this, he replied. Some folks complain that he should have come sooner. It's easy to forget that the US economy was cratering in 2008. It was surely a political mission impossible, in the first term for the president to be seen to be cavorting across Africa when jobs were being lost all over America. You could imagine how it would have played on Fox images of jobless folks somewhere in the US contrasted with the president landing somewhere in Africa. The caption, is this man president of the US of A or the US of Africa? The US economy has largely mended. It's creating jobs. The president has made the US energy independent and is now in fact the price setter of oil, and that represents a serious geopolitical inflection point which has advanced US power. For someone whom the right like to characterize as supine, these folks need a Son and Lumiere show, he has pushed NATO right up against Vladimir Putin, and the pivot to Asia is gaining bite and traction. In fact, history will judge President Obama far more kindly than some of the trenchant contemporary criticism. The ambassador confirmed that the US's total contribution to Kenya was $1 billion a year, with the biggest component of that intervention being via the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief program, which is providing ARVs for more than 700,000 of our citizens. Alex Chamwada, who's putting together a documentary about POTUS's visit, keeps asking me, what's the positive economic spillover from this visit? In June 2013, Ben Rhodes, who's the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Speech Writing, said, frankly, we have heard a high demand signal from the US private sector. What we hear from our businesses is that they want to get in the game in Africa. Take a look at whether it is GE setting up their sub-Saharan African headquarters in Westlands or Dow Chemical who have set up in Riverside, Google, many others. That demand signal about which Ben Rhodes spoke has preceded this presidential visit. The president's visit will crown an affair that began in earnest a little while back. The US economy remains the biggest and most dynamic in the world, and therefore closer engagement is a no-brainer. AGOA is kicking big as well. North America is responsible for at least half of our inward remittances and bought 66% of our Eurobonds. The ostensible reason for this visit is the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. This seal of approval around entrepreneurship is well appreciated. There are deep pools of smart capital that our entrepreneurs can tap into. I can hear someone asking, but what about the look east policy? My answer is we have to look west and to look east. We have two eyes. To look just one way, it's like poking one of your eyes out. It's really very silly. In order to succeed in this new 21st century, we have to be as globally fluent as this president, born in Honolulu of a Kenyan father and an American mother, who is on his way to Nairobi. So, karibu, Mr. President. On that note, I put up the links for Bob Godek's comments at Mindspeak, another link for the Q&A, and then finally a link for an interview I did at the very end when everyone had left. Floor Spa in Kenya is halting operations, laying off workers. The mining sector is in deep trouble. Kenya shilling 98.50 and not too far off that multi-year low at 99.20 that we saw a few weeks ago. The CBK has sold 25 billion shillings worth in order to try and stem the dollar's rise. They can't keep going at that rate. The Nairobi All Shares minus 0.3% this year and 0.38% below 2015 closing low from the 8th of January. So we're still, whilst we've based out, we haven't moved much higher. NSE 20 down 6.533% this year, 33 points above its 2015 low from the 9th of June. If you want to check any listed share, there's a link on the website, Rich Data. And then I like this photograph that the whiskey whisperer Sam Dabe tweeted, the Masai Mara in Kenya. It's a rather good photograph, you must agree. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Trust you had a great weekend. Looking forward to the week